For centuries, the west coast of Norway was a land where time seemed to move at a different pace. Colossal mountains plunged directly into the sea, creating fjords as deep as they were mysterious. The beauty of this ice-sculpted geography was undeniable, but for those who had to move, live, or transport along this coast, it was unforgiving. The E39 road, with its 1,100 kilometers between Kristiansand and Trondheim, wound through this natural wall. But the route was not continuous. 7 times, the asphalt disappeared before the icy waters. 7 times you had to stop. Wait. Get on a ferry. Cross. Get off. And only then continue. A journey that could last up to 21 hours. Not because of the distance, but because of the interruptions. For Norwegians, this routine became part of everyday life. For tourists, it was picturesque. But for the government, it was a delay. And for engineers, an invitation to madness. On paper, the proposal seemed simple. Eliminate the ferries, transforming this route into a continuous road. But in reality, it meant tackling Europe's most challenging natural obstacles. Fjords that were miles wide and hundreds of feet deep. Violent currents, extreme climates, and rigorous environmental requirements. There was no way to copy ready-made solutions. New ones had to be invented. What began as a mobility dream turned into the largest infrastructure project in Norway's history. Each fjord required a unique solution. There was no standard, no reference. Bridges that had never been built before, tunnels that had never been dug, and ideas that had not yet existed would be needed. The goal? To cut travel hours. But the impact would be much greater. To boost the economy, bring isolated regions closer together, connect families, and transform the country's mental map. The first challenge was psychological. Many believed it was impossible, that the cost would be unbearable, that the risks would be too high. But the government was firm, and the engineers were determined. A new era was dawning, one in which mountains and chasms would no longer be barriers, but pathways. This was not just a Norwegian project, it was a manifesto. Proof that even the most untamed terrain can be traversed with vision, courage, and innovation. The E39 would no longer be a road with pauses. It would become a continuous line of connection, progress, and overcoming. And at the heart of this transformation were structures so bold that they seemed to have been taken from science fiction films. Submerged tunnels stretching tens of kilometers, floating bridges spanning fjords 600 meters deep, towers anchored to the seabed like oil platforms. The impossible, for the first time, seemed within reach. In Norway, nature dictates the rules. The fjords, shaped by ice ages, are not just beautiful landscapes. They are deep and unforgiving watery abysses. To cross them, the logic of traditional engineering breaks down. There is no room for error when the ground is hundreds of meters below the surface. It is in this scenario that the largest infrastructure project in the history of Norway was conceived: the complete reconnection of the E39 highway. This was no ordinary plan. It wasn't about rebuilding a road. It was about reinventing the way the country moved. Eliminating all ferries on the west coast required more than bridges and tunnels. It required radical imagination. Each fjord presented a unique technical dilemma. The solution for one wouldn't work for the other. The geological terrain varied wildly. The ocean currents were unpredictable. The environmental impacts were sensitive. And yet the plan went ahead. Underpinning it all was a clear vision. Norway needed a continuous backbone, a line that would connect the country from south to north, without interruptions, without delays, without patching. This would have enormous economic impacts, boost regional integration, and strengthen domestic and foreign trade. But the cost was colossal, estimated to cost tens of billions of dollars. The project would require decades of work, cutting-edge technology, and a network of brilliant minds. For the engineers involved, there was no manual. It was the kind of project that could not be copied, but invented. The country began to invest heavily in applied research, simulations, international partnerships, and small-scale testing. Laboratories began to model the behavior of ocean currents, the resistance of submerged materials, and the stability of floating structures. Each bridge, each tunnel, became a unique piece, custom designed for its fjord. One of the most impressive solutions was the proposal for submerged floating tunnels, a concept that seemed to belong to the future. Enormous tubes, suspended underwater by cables, allowing ships to pass over them and cars to drive through them. It had never been done on a real scale, but in Norway, it became a concrete possibility. In addition to floating tunnels, projects for cable-stayed bridges with floating towers anchored like oil platforms also emerged. The extreme conditions required these structures to withstand violent winds, rough seas, and drastic temperature variations. The calculations had to be exact. Even a small failure could cost lives, and billions. At the heart of all this were deeply Norwegian values: resilience, respect for nature, and trust in human knowledge. With each obstacle, a new solution was born. And as the first sections were built, the world began to take notice. It was not just a road, it was a demonstration of boldness, a living laboratory for the future of infrastructure. When the first maps outlined the proposed E39 project without ferries, one specific point caused shivers in experienced engineers: the connection between Stavanger and Haugesund. In this section, the sea was not only deep, it looked like a liquid precipice. Building a bridge there was impossible. The weather conditions, the width of the section, and the heavy maritime traffic ruled out this option immediately. There was only one option left: to dive in. Literally. Thus was born the Rogfast project, a name that would become a symbol of overcoming obstacles. The proposal was as bold as it was frightening: a 27-kilometer-long underwater road tunnel, dug at an impressive 390 meters deep. It would be the longest and deepest ever built on the planet. An unprecedented feat in a hostile environment. Building a tunnel at this depth requires more than just excavation. It requires dealing with gigantic underground pressures, geological instability, and constant humidity. Any mistake could cause catastrophic collapses. That's why the technology used in Rogfast is state-of-the-art. Giant drilling machines, real-time monitoring sensors, reinforced concrete, and millimeter-perfect drainage systems are all part of the daily routine. The tunnel will not be a simple continuous tube. It will have emergency exits every 250 meters, shoulder areas every 500 meters, and a complete system of cameras and sensors. Safety has been designed based on the highest international standards. Even in the event of a total breakdown, drivers will be able to evacuate safely. In addition, the tunnel will have an intersection with the island of Kvitsøy, creating a strategic link between the island and the mainland that was previously unthinkable. The estimated cost of Rogfast is $2 billion. A huge figure, but it represents an investment in connectivity, efficiency, and national pride. The time saved by avoiding the ferry will be around 40 minutes, but the impact is much greater. Continuous flow of goods, increased regional competitiveness, and real integration between communities separated by generations. During construction, there were moments of tension. Landslides, leaks, and technical delays tested the team's limits. But perseverance prevailed. Every meter dug was a victory against nature. Every reinforcement installed, a promise that the impossible was just a matter of time and technology. Rogfast is scheduled for completion in 2026. When completed, it will not be just a tunnel. It will be a symbol of human ability to traverse the impassable. An underground cathedral built with concrete, steel, and courage. Among the many trials of the E39 highway, one stands out for its silent brutality: the Sulafjorden Fjord. With its steep cliffs and deep, choppy waters, it represents an obstacle so severe that no conventional solution seems to be able to cope. The crossing here is not just technical, it is almost metaphysical. It is the place where the limits of engineering touch the limits of imagination. Approximately 4 kilometers wide, and with a depth of more than 400 meters, the Sulafjorden is a liquid colossus. Its surface reflects a deceptive peace. Below, the currents trace treacherous paths, and the seabed bends in unstable shape. Anchoring something here requires more than precision. It requires boldness. The first proposal was to create a suspension bridge, but not just any bridge. It would have 3 towers, with the main one anchored 400 meters deep. It would be the deepest foundation ever built in a fjord. This central tower would be like an inverted spear, driven into the seabed, with technology inspired by North Sea oil platforms. But the cost and structural risks put this proposal under intense scrutiny. The second alternative seemed even more futuristic: a submerged floating tunnel. A huge tube, suspended underwater by high-strength cables, attached to floating pontoons on the surface. It would be like a submerged necklace, swaying with the tides, but stable enough for vehicles to cross safely. This idea, never applied on a large scale, gained traction precisely because it was the only viable one in such extreme conditions. The biggest challenge, however, is not just in the construction, it is in maintaining the structural integrity over the decades. The fjord is alive. It moves, breathes, vibrates. A bridge or tunnel built here must dance with it, absorb movements without cracking, and withstand forces that vary with the seasons, the weather, and maritime traffic. Engineers are testing new materials, flexible metal alloys, autonomous sensors, and artificial intelligence for real-time monitoring. Nothing can be left to chance. More than a matter of traffic, crossing the Sulafjorden is a symbolic act. It is like taming a dragon that sleeps underwater. The structure, when completed, will not only connect 2 geographical points, it will connect past and future. It will show the world that it is possible to face the incomprehensible and overcome it with intelligence and courage. There is something deeply human about this challenge. It is not just about cars, tunnels, and concrete. It is about not accepting limits imposed by geography. It is about not bowing to fear. And that is why the Sulafjorden, however brutal it may be, will be conquered. There are challenging fjords. There are colossal fjords. And then there's Sognefjorden, known as the King of the Fjords. That name is not a metaphor. It's a literal description of what it represents. The widest, deepest, most imposing of all. Crossing Sognefjorden is like trying to cross a chasm covered by a reflecting pool. And this is where the E39 project faces its final boss. At 3.7 kilometers wide and a staggering 1,300 meters deep, Sognefjorden is a no-brainer. There's no existing bridge that can handle such proportions. There's no conventional tunnel that can go that deep. And because it's a vital shipping route, any solution must allow for the continuous passage of ships up to 400 meters wide and 70 meters high. It's like trying to build a road over a corridor of giants. The first proposal brought to the table was a suspension bridge with towers that would be 450 meters high. They would be by far the tallest towers in the world, even dwarfing skyscrapers like the Empire State Building. But building towers of this magnitude, with foundations in a fjord more than a kilometer deep, borders on the surreal. The engineering is there, but the risk is monumental. And the costs, stratospheric. The second alternative was an elevated floating bridge, anchored by cables attached to offshore platforms. It would remain on the surface, allowing road traffic, but be high enough for ships to pass underneath. The problem? Instability. The winds of the Sognefjorden are notoriously violent. Such a structure could sway dangerously. The third proposal is as ambitious as it is elegant. A floating underwater tunnel, suspended by pontoons, that would remain below the surface, allowing sea traffic above and road traffic inside. This idea combines the advantages of the traditional tunnel with the flexibility of modern offshore structures. But here, the challenge is not only technical, but also mental. Convincing society that it is safe to drive for miles inside a tube suspended underwater requires a paradigm shift. Finally, a hybrid solution is also being considered, a combination of bridge and tunnel. The initial section would be a conventional elevated bridge, as far as conditions allow. Then the connection would plunge beneath the fjord in a floating underwater tunnel. It would be a masterpiece of engineering, fusing two technologies into one, a single cohesive and adaptable structure. The environmental issue, as in the entire project, is central. Sognefjorden is home to unique ecosystems, and any intervention must respect their balance. Silent construction technologies are being studied, without explosions, with reduced noise and vibration impact. The goal is not just to defeat nature, but to dialogue with it. Sognefjorden is the pinnacle of A39's emotional and physical engineering. If defeated, it will not only be a Norwegian landmark, it will be a landmark of humanity. A reminder that the greatest giants, even those invisible underwater, can be faced with courage, innovation, and respect. When we look at the great works of humanity, it is easy to be dazzled by the structures, the numbers, the historical milestones. But behind every meter of tunnel dug, every bridge built over the abyss, there is a silent army. Ordinary people with extraordinary stories. They are the unsung heroes of E39. Engineers, divers, geologists, workers, technicians, all united by a cause greater than any of them. At the Rogfast tunnel construction site, for example, is Lars, a 39-year-old engineer from Bergen. He grew up crossing fjords on ferries, watching his father spend hours commuting to work. Today, he leads a team that excavates the earth from the seabed. Every controlled explosion, every reinforcement installed. It's like I'm redrawing the map of my own country, he says, his eyes welling up. For him, this isn't just engineering, it's redemption. Further north, in the Sulafjorden region, is Amal, a diver who specializes in underwater inspections. Her routine begins before sunrise. She descends hundreds of meters in pitch darkness to inspect structures that will one day support floating bridges. The slightest miscalculation could mean the collapse of the whole thing. And yet, she goes down, day after day. Down there is no room for doubt. There is only now, he says, with the serenity of someone who has faced the impossible. There are also the faces we will never see. Technicians who work night shifts monitoring pressure and vibration sensors. Scientists who spend months simulating the behavior of crosswinds in closed laboratories. Engineers who leave their families for weeks in remote areas to supervise construction work in extreme conditions. Many of them will never cross the road they are helping to build. But everyone knows that, thanks to their efforts, millions of people will cross the fjords safely. They face real risks. Accidents happen. The working conditions, even with the highest safety standards, are challenging. Unexpected storms, communication failures, constant physical and mental pressure. Some get sick, others give up, but most stay. Steadfast, silent, invisible. And what drives them? For some, it is the pride of participating in something great. For others, it is a sense of mission. Some say it is for the future. And there are those who simply do it because someone has to. These heroes don't get statues. Their names won't be on golden plaques. But without them, Norway's most daring project would never get off the ground. They are the ones who turn calculations into concrete. They are the ones who put screws to imagination. Decades of planning, billions in investment, countless sleepless nights. And now, the ferry-free road is about to emerge, like a pulsating vein connecting the south and north of Norway. The E39 highway, previously interrupted by 7 water crossings, becomes a continuous line of concrete, steel, and courage. And with it, a new backbone is born, not only geographical, but emotional, economic, and symbolic. When completed, the journey between Kristiansand and Trondheim will no longer take 21 hours. Instead, it will be possible to cross the entire stretch in about 13 hours, without stops, without waiting, without ferries. This transformation is not only practical, but also revolutionary. For the first time, previously isolated regions will be fully connected. Business will expand, goods will move quickly, families will come together, and tourism will find more accessible routes to landscapes that once seemed unreachable. But the legacy of the E39 goes beyond the numbers. What was built there is not just a road. It is a symbol of the human capacity to reinvent itself in the face of the insurmountable. The entire project was carried out on some of the most difficult terrain on the planet, under rigorous demands, environmental and climate change, with solutions never before tested. Success lies not only in the completion of the works, but in the courage to try. Norway shows the world that it is possible to balance progress and sustainability. Each tunnel, each bridge, was designed to cause the least possible impact on nature. Sensors monitor marine life, recyclable materials were prioritized, and clean energy sources power part of the infrastructure. This model can and should be replicated by other nations that face natural barriers. For the United Arab Emirates, which also invests in large visionary works and futuristic technologies, the Norwegian example is inspiring. Here, it is not about ostentation, but about integration. It is not about what you see, but about what you connect. It is not about breaking records, but about breaking distances. A philosophy that resonates with the values of resilience, excellence, and legacy that also drive the projects of the Emirates. The E39 without ferries is a victory of engineering, yes, but it is, above all, a victory of persistence, of faith in science, of patience in progress, of the small daily victories that, when added together, create something eternal. And each screw tightened on that road, each rock removed from the path, each meter conquered under the sea, now forms a link to something greater. The confidence that the impossible is just a starting point. This new backbone of Norway does not just connect cities, it connects visions, hopes, and reminds us that even in the face of the greatest abysses, it is possible to build bridges. In a world increasingly divided by physical, emotional, and cultural barriers, Norway teaches us a silent but resounding lesson. Abysses do not exist to separate us, but to challenge us to cross them. The E39 road is not just a route between cities. It is the materialization of a belief that human will, when guided by courage and intelligence, can overcome even the most inhospitable terrain. If you have come this far, it is because, like us, you believe in the power of stories that connect us. Stories of overcoming, of innovation, and of ordinary people making the impossible happen. And this is just the beginning. If this story touched you in any way, like the video, share it with someone who needs inspiration, and subscribe to the channel to continue discovering stories that reveal the most extraordinary side of the world we live in. because every epic road begins with a step, or, in this case, a click.